All right, Alexander. All right, Patrick. Let's talk about what's going on in Ukraine, in the conflict zone. Patrick Lancaster. I don't think he needs any introduction. Alexander. Everyone knows of Patrick's amazing work, and I will have all of Patrick's links in the description box down below, as well as a pinned comment. So definitely search out Patrick and all of his incredible videos. Alexander, we have Patrick with us. Patrick is our eyes, our ears as to what is happening in Ukraine and in Donbass. So let's get this video started, Alexander.
Absolutely, and can I just say I will give a very brief introduction. Patrick, for me, is the outstanding English language war reporter in this war in Ukraine. If I really want to know what's going on the front lines, his videos are essential. We do commentary on the Duran. We have to work out who we can rely upon, who's giving the accurate and reliable information. Patrick always does. And if you want to follow what's actually going on the front lines, get a real feel of the battle, go and follow Patrick, see what he says, see where he goes, see the astonishing places he goes to, and the commentary that he gives. So Patrick, last time we spoke, Ukraine was on the offensive. They were battling in all kinds of places. There was going to be the great offensive, the counteroffensive we were hearing so much about. It looks like things have completely changed. It seems that Ukraine is now on the back foot. It looks like the Russians are advancing. Now, I say that if you go to the Russian Ministry of Defense, if you go to President Putin, they're not talking about that very much. But I presume that, all this that we're hearing about Avdeyevka, where you have been, about Marinka, where you have also been, about the Russian advances there. I presume that this is indeed happening in the way that we see. So perhaps you could tell us a bit. Tell us, first of all, about, what you know about these two places, Avdeyevka and Marinka, and what your understanding is of the situation there now.
Alrighty. Just first of all, I want to say thanks for having me as always. It's always great to be on. I appreciate you helping me, spread the word of what, I see and what I feel needs to be shown to the world like you guys do. Just to give, a little more insight to the viewers, just in case there's some new ones that don't really know too much about where I am actually. Most of my reports come out from the front line, as you said, on the Russian-controlled side of the front line in the territory that in 2014 had a referendum. The locals voted to break away from Ukraine, and that's what preceded this 9-year war, not a 2-year or year-and-a-half war like the West would like people to think. And this is also, they had a referendum in September of last year to actually join Russia. The local population consider these areas as part of Russia, and the West considers them part of Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine does. The right of self-determination is something that should be considered, and the local population wants their territory to be part of Russia, and by Russian law now it is. So as far as the going back and forth, who's taking what, as you said, the Ukrainian counteroffensive did not turn out the way they seemed. I mean, first they were blaming the delays on the weather with overgrown bushes and things, and now the winter and all this, just more and more excuses by the Ukrainian authorities. But the fact is, they didn't take any real territory, significant territory during their counteroffensive, and now, as you mentioned, Russia is taking territory. In Donetsk, where I'm mainly based, in the northern west, you've got Avdeyevka. As you mentioned, southern west, you've got Marinka. Now, in Avdeyevka, there are steady gains, and the city has slowly been starting to be encircled. It's been a very slow process, but a constant process of Russia taking more gains to encircle. It's a strategic part of Russia's war fighting is making a cauldron, as they call it, and just squeezing the enemy forces out of this cauldron and taking the territory. Did the same thing back in Debaltseve in 2015 and many other areas. So it's definitely gains being taken by Russia in Avdeyevka. And down to the south, Marinka, they have claimed total control of the city and some of the outlying areas. Now, this is a suburb of Donetsk, which they've, as well as Avdeyevka, have been shelling the city of Donetsk from for years now, 9 years. And now Russia has claimed control of Marinka, which before the war had over 10,000 population. Unfortunately, now there's basically no population except for military forces, because through the fighting, the city has just been completely destroyed. There's virtually nothing left besides ruins and trenches. But taking these areas, Russia taking Marinka and taking Avdeyevka, protects or further protects the city of Donetsk, because in the last years, but specifically every couple of months, there's an uptake by Ukrainian forces attacking on the center of the city and many civilian areas of Donetsk. And in this last couple of months, and particularly the last weeks, they have been on another increase of the shelling of the city and the center. And unfortunately, this time it seems the Ukrainian forces are changing their tactics a bit by doing double taps, or basically firing once, waiting a little bit of time, and then giving the first responders, firefighters, ambulances, police, journalists time to arrive on scene, and then firing again once or several times. And in the last month, there was 3 journalists injured because of these double taps, as they call it, which, I mean, there's no question targeting first responders is a war crime condemned against the Geneva Convention. And 3 journalists were killed, injured. One seriously injured. He had a piece of shrapnel from a cluster bomb that came from a United States HIMARS stuck in his liver and had to have it surgically removed. He was actually a friend of mine, one of my old cameramen that used to help me film. But luckily he made it out alive, and the other 2 journalists that were injured at the same explosion also lived, thank goodness. Now, unfortunately, in the last several months, there has been 2 journalists killed near Zaporozhye, out of Donetsk, but it's still the same. They need to be mentioned because they were killed by purportedly Western-supplied weapons as well. Now, these double taps, as they call it, continue to happen just across. It's not like a 1-off or a 2-off or a 50-off. This is something that happens, if not every day, every couple of days. Just the other day, I was at a location where it was in the center of a residential area, and it was actually just the management or control center for the city stoplights, and that was hit directly by a United States HIMARS. Now, luckily, on that point, there was not a double tap. It was a little bit nerve-wracking it being there, because I'd actually been out of the front for a while with my family, but now I'm back and trying to show what I can. But in that attack, unfortunately, there was 2 civilians killed, and at least 3 injured. And just the day before that, there was a mechanics shop where they work on the city buses, and a direct hit to some sort of artillery or mortar. It wasn't exactly clear at the time which one it was. It wasn't a HIMARS that time, but it was suspected to be a 155 millimeter Western supplied weapon that hit just outside this mechanic shop. And unfortunately, some of the shrapnel flew about 15 meters and it killed the worker there, who was just trying to do his job as a mechanic. Now, if we go past the exact area around Donetsk, where they're taking the territory, Marinka and Avdeyevka, as we said, we go more north to the area which used to be a lot more in the news, but Bakhmut or Artyomsk. And now Russia has claimed control of a large swath of territory just south and pushing out from Bakhmut. And I actually just came back from the front line in that direction, where I was embedded with the Russian forces, particularly a volunteer battalion called the Wolves. And they were firing artillery on Ukrainian positions in support of the advancement of Russian forces. So I've got that report coming pretty soon. But those are the three areas that I have the most knowledge on as far as the for sure advancements of Russian forces. So if there's any other...
Well, there's a lot to
anything else
discuss
you'd
here.
like to know?
A lot to discuss here, Patrick. Let me just reiterate the point you made. These double taps are intended to kill relief workers who in Donetsk City
no
are
question. There were
overwhelmingly
several
civilians.
firefighters and police killed as well.
Exactly. So this is deliberately targeting relief workers and civilians. That's the first. I mean, I just want to make that absolutely clear so that there's no ambiguity about this. And as you correctly say, that is a war crime. Now, the second thing I wanted to ask is about these attacks on Donetsk. It's not a question, it's a rhetorical question in a way. In the media in the West, we're reading all the time about the fact that Ukraine is suffering a shell shortage, that they're short of ammunition. But it seems that despite the fact that they are supposed to be short of ammunition, they still want to continue to target Donetsk city and to engage in double taps, which are killing civilians and which are intended to kill civilians. Now, that is a pretty astonishing thing when you think about it. It suggests a kind of visceral anger against the people of Donetsk. I'm using my words carefully now, which is most shocking and incomprehensible to me. It shows a sense of priorities which I find incredible. Is there anything you want to say in response to that, Patrick, before we proceed?
Well, I think you've got it right on. I mean, there's no question the deliberate targeting of civilians in these double taps, and this goes on top of the normal targeting of civilian areas. Now, and all these people that have died in these attacks deserve their stories to be told. I mean, like I said, I've been away from Donbass for a little while with my family, but there was another really good journalist, Johnny from Cafe Revolution, who's been on the scene, being while I'm gone, the only English reports coming out of Donetsk. And unfortunately, he was on the scene just over a month ago, where a HIMARS hit a social welfare administration building and the surrounding areas in the center. And he raced to the scene, as he always does while I've been gone, doing a great job showing these reports. And he interviewed a young man, 19 years old, who was there just volunteering to help dig people out of the gravel in the rubble, because there was people buried under the building that exploded around them. This young man, and he interviewed him. And of course, him as a journalist was worried about the double tap and did the best work he could and then left. And not 2 minutes later, another HIMARS came, hit the same area, and killed that young man. And actually, the young man purportedly jumped on his girlfriend to try to hide her from the explosion, and they were riddled with shrapnel. And he actually made it for another 6 days in intensive care and then was killed. And just one of many horrible situations.
Can I just ask you, Patrick, if Avdeyevka is captured, I mean, Marinka, I understand, is captured. If Avdeyevka is captured, will that bring the Ukrainian artillery finally out of range? I should tell you, and I found this an absolutely chilling thing, that the London Times, which certainly knows what is going on, actually talked about it. Actually, there was an article in which they said that Avdeyevka was a dagger pointing at Donetsk, and they said that with approval. But if Avdeyevka is finally captured, will that finally mean that this shelling ends?
It will definitely decrease the ability of Ukraine to fire on the center of Donetsk and all of the regions of Donetsk. But unfortunately, I don't think it'll stop it. I think they're going to be pushing as hard as they can, as much as they can, because yes, some of the shorter range it will, but the longer range like the HIMARS and other rockets like this, it's going to be a while before Russia pushes that far out. So unfortunately, Donetsk is the tip of the spear. Avdeyevka is not. Donetsk is the tip of the spear going into Ukraine, and it's the most populated area in the Donetsk region. It's the capital of the region. So, people are there trying to be their strongest and to get their self-determination heard, and it's been almost 10 years now. May 26th, it'll be 10 years since the war started in Donetsk. And people don't realize that around the world, and they should. But we pray for the population of Donetsk, and I do everything I can to, as you guys do, to show the world what's really happening.
Right. Now, in previous programs that we've done with you, you've described the situation in Avdeyevka as it then was. You said that this is an incredibly heavily fortified complex area. You talked about the fact that there were CCTV cameras, that there were pillboxes, that there were minefields. This is, from what I can understand, an extremely difficult place to capture. Do you feel, rather than as I do, that it's actually going a bit faster than some people expected? I mean, you're talking about this cauldron starting to develop. And can you give us a sense of how difficult you think the fighting there is likely to be, given, as I said, what an elaborate fortification system there is there?
Well, on one hand, as far as the last months, yeah, maybe it is starting to move on pretty well and fast as people hoped. But if we looked at the long run, since the beginning of last year, many people thought things were going to go a lot faster. Even the U.S. general, 3 days, Russia will be in Kiev. So, even myself, in one of my early reports when this whole thing started again, I said, today is going to be the last day. Donetsk is a frontline city, and boy, was I wrong. So as far as the fortifications, yeah, one thing we didn't take into account at first, or me personally, that, yeah, Ukraine had 8 years of war to fortify these areas, to get things ready. Just like in Mariupol, Azov had 8 years to get Mariupol ready, to put all the supplies and ammunition down in the catacombs underneath the Azov and Illicha plants, just to get in, because they knew they were gonna go the long haul. So, they're very built up, and it's difficult for Russian forces, not as easy as they thought it was going to be. So it is what it is.
I've heard a story, I've heard reports, not stories, reports that most of the soldiers, Russian soldiers, who are fighting in Avdeyevka are actually local people. They are people from Donbass, and that they're local brigades, and that this is, that they're particularly motivated because this is not just their territory, but it's, Donetsk is their city. From your knowledge, is that true? Are they indeed the local people who are fighting to take control of Avdeyevka, to, push the Ukrainians back from Donetsk?
Yeah, definitely. There is a lot of locals fighting, just like most of them have been fighting for the last many years. Maybe not the whole 9 years, but for between 2014 and 2022, 99 point something % of the fighters in Donbass were locals, and now you can find many battalions and groups that are mainly consisting of locals. I don't want to say exactly too many different names of the groups, just for Yeah, I think we can understand.
Absolutely.
But there are many groups that are fully locals, many groups that are partially, and many that are volunteers from different countries, specifically South Ossetia, Abkhazia. I've met Armenians fighting, many from South America, France. Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of locals. And a lot of Russians and others as well. So.
Right. Can I just ask now, because we've asked this before in previous programs, I mean, the Russians now have seen the offensive off, the Ukrainian offensive off. They're now pushing forward. You've been in the front lines recently. You were with this group near Bakhmut. I mean, what is your sense of the morale of the soldiers at the moment? Is it high, or is it getting higher? Is it getting stronger? Are they feeling more confident? I mean, from what I could understand from your previous programs, it was always pretty firm. I mean, there was never any real sense of a wobble. But are they feeling more optimistic now?
They are feeling like the end of the war might be coming sooner than they thought it was going to be in the last times. Of course, the events with Israel and Palestine and the funds getting funneled to Israel are changing the situation, and even the small soldiers understand this, as well as the top brass. So, and with the advances, things seem to be looking up. Now, people aren't sure exactly what the end is going to be. I mean, when I ask these soldiers what's going to be happening next, they say, well, our victory. And I say, well, okay, well, what is that victory? And they, the overlying thing is they say, well, people are going to stop dying. That's and we're going to have peace. And they kind of stay away from where that line is going to be. But as I say, all the time, we know where the minimum line is. The minimum line of the next way possible for peace is for Russia to be in control of what is, by Russian law, legally considered Russia, and that's all of the what is considered by Ukraine in the west, Lugansk region, Donetsk region, Zaporozhye and Kherson. All of those territories. That is the minimum that by Russian law, Russia can stop this war regardless of peace talks. There's no way Russia can give up what is legally part of Russia by Russian law. So that's the minimum it's going to go. Now, is it going to go all the way to Transnistria? Who knows? Or all the way to Kiev? I think there's only a couple people in the world that might know that right now. But we'll have to be spectators and see and report on where it ends up and where it stops.
I don't know whether you saw it, but there was a joke that Putin made when he met with some Russian war reporters. He said, will we go to Kiev? Well, I know the answer, but I'm not telling. he made a joke about it. But anyway.
Something like that, yeah, for sure.
But can we turn to Bakhmut? Because, this has been, from what I can tell, I mean, in some ways, the toughest and bloodiest battle of the whole war up to now. I mean, I've been looking at what the Russian Ministry of Defense gives as casualty figures. And I mean, they've been absolutely horrific. I mean, of course, they're giving Ukrainian casualty figures. But even during the summer, when, Ukraine was attacking Zaporozhye, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, it was around Bakhmut that the Ukrainians were taking the biggest losses. There's been a lot of talk recently that the Russians are moving towards this town, Chasov Yar, which is to the west of Bakhmut. Whilst you were there, I mean, did you get any sense of that? Were people talking about this? Or is this just, again, still people pushing forward, that there is this sense that, that they're pushing people away from Bakhmut, but the men on the ground don't yet know what the ultimate objective of this battle is?
Yeah, I mean, they're taking one day at a time. They're trying to stay alive and trying to push forward and trying to follow their orders to the best of their abilities. So, I mean, they're concentrating on just moving forward and going from there. Is where they're going to end up. they're
It's
not
not-
sure yet.
Yeah, it's not their business. There's also reports now that some ex-Wagner fighters are now back in Bakhmut, especially on the southwest. Did you hear anything about that or see anything about that? That, not Wagner as such, but volunteer units based around Wagner fighters have returned. Was there any sign of that you saw?
Well, I could say I noticed a few Wagner patches. Now that could signify that they were former members of Wagner, or that could signify they're just fans of Wagner. I think
Yeah.
we can make our own conclusions.
Yes. Are these the two biggest areas of the fighting at the moment? Avdeyevka, Marinka, the area around Donetsk, and Bakhmut. Is that where the toughest fighting is happening? Because certainly that's my impression.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely on the top. There's a few areas up north in the Lugansk and Kharkov direction that are getting going, but again, I haven't been up there myself yet. Hopefully, in the near future, I'll be able to go up there and get a little more good insight on the situation there. But for my knowledge, yeah, these are the three hot spots: Marinka, Avdeyevka, and Bakhmut.
Can you tell us a bit about Marinka? Because I think you've been there as well, and you basically know the layout a bit there. I mean, why did this place take such a long time to capture also? Because this battle has been underway for 20 months, as I understand it. I mean, what was it specific to Marinka that made it such a tough place to capture? Tougher than Bakhmut or possibly Avdeyevka as well?
Yeah, I've been on the edge, and I've had actually many close people that I trust that were fighting there. And they said that the Ukrainians were fighting very hard and, didn't want to give an inch, for quite a while because, it was, an area that they were using as a strategic firing position, just like Avdeyevka. And, I'm not one of these that really jumps on the conspiracies and all these really far out there things, but I can tell you what I've been told by people that I trust that were fighting on that for control of Marinka for the Russian forces. They told me that many instances they would have Ukrainian soldiers just running at them from the line, trying to take their positions, and it appeared to them that they were under the influence of some sort of mind-altering substance to kind of get them going a little bit more. I try to stay away from that type of thing if I, showing, reporting that unless I know for sure. And and the only thing less than seeing it with my own eyes is having people I trust tell me they're sure that they saw Ukrainian soldiers that were using narcotics to advance their fighting abilities. And they said it was working in some cases, obviously it didn't work long enough. So
yeah, I would just make an observation about that. I too don't know to what extent this is actually happening in this war, but it has happened in other wars. You've been in the Middle East, and you know that some of the organizations, ISIS, for example, apparently did do that there. And I think it's well established that in the Second World War, if it's not well established, it is conclusively known that the Germans regularly gave amphetamines to their soldiers. That was in the Second World War. So, it's not as if this kind of thing would be unprecedented or new. But let's move on from that because we don't have the facts. So why did the Ukrainians hold on to Marinka for so long? Is it again because it's so close to Donetsk? Were they shelling Donetsk from there? And again, I understand that this is perhaps more a strategic thing. Lots of stories that we're reading in all kinds of places that Marinka is the linchpin of some kind of fortification situation, and that if Marinka is finally captured, other areas will start to be cut off from each other, and it'll make it easier for the Russians to capture them. I mean, did you hear anybody on the front lines discuss this at all? Why the Ukrainians made such a thing of trying to hold on to Marinka?
Well, I mean, I think, when there's these, key places are, that are almost like trophies. I mean, it goes all the way back to the Donetsk airport. The Donetsk airport was this trophy that the two sides, one fighting from the old terminal, one fighting from the new terminal, going against each other in 2014 and 15. And it was, just this prize, a morale thing for the people, for the locals of Donetsk. And when they finally got the airport, it was such a big boost to the morale of the people and the soldiers. Now, is that we saw that again with Bakhmut, and when Russia took that, it was a big thing. Now there's also stories. Oh, is it this strategic? How strategic is it? Is it the path to Kramatorsk? I'm not a professional enough soldier, wasn't in the military long enough to understand the full strategic advances of different things. But I can tell you, Marinka, it's, as I said, used to attack the city. It's a key fighting area to move on to Donetsk, as Avdeyevka is. Yeah. So, I mean, that's, to the best of my ability, what I can say.
Yeah, I understand. Can I just ask about the mood in Donetsk itself amongst the civilian people? Because, as you correctly said, they've been in a state of war now for 9 years, and pretty grim war as well. They've had the Ukrainians parked just close to their city. The Times calling Avdeyevka the dagger pointing at the heart of Donetsk. So, what is the mood now? Because were they nervous during the summer when Ukraine was launching its offensive? Are they more optimistic now? Do they sense there that finally the war is moving towards a victorious conclusion? Is there an uplift in morale? What is happening?
Well, what I can say, just a little insight for the people that might not really have a good understanding of like the situation, because if there's people watching here that might be relying on the Western media, they might think, Ukraine is coming to save the people of Donetsk from the big bad Russians. But the fact is, the local population of Donetsk hates the Ukrainian government, and because every civilian knows one of their family members or one of their close friends or that has been either killed or seriously injured by Ukraine shelling civilian areas and targeting the civilians in what the locals call terrorist attacks on the local population. So if anybody's watching this, don't get confused. The local population is not waiting for Ukraine to come save them. They're waiting for Russia to save them from the daily attacks by Ukrainian forces. And that's what they've been doing for the last 9 years. Now, right now, they see a little bit coming, but they don't believe what's happening yet. I mean, of course, at the beginning of 2022, there was a huge uplift in morale, thinking, the war is going to stop, Russia's going to move in, blaze through everything. And then morale came down a bit when it didn't go as fast as everyone thought. So now people are being morally cautious and just waiting for something really concrete. Are we moving on this? What's going to happen? But I can say the people and the soldiers, as I said, they have a feeling that the war is not going to last as long as they thought it was a few months ago.
Yep.
When that's going to end, they don't know.
No, Russia's going to have elections in a few months. I mean, in March, there's presidential elections in Russia. And, of course, Donetsk is also now part of Russia, as far as Russian law and constitution and the feelings of its people are concerned. So they will be participating in those elections. Now, do people worry about that? Do they think that as the elections get underway, Ukraine is going to do everything it possibly can to disrupt them. I mean, will there be more shelling? Will there be more things of that kind? And are people nonetheless intending to vote in these elections? Because I presume that there will be a big effort made to try to organize elections in Donetsk. And of course, we've had other elections. We had that referendum last year, for example, in Donetsk. So we see that they can be organized even in times of war. But I mean, how do people feel about the elections? Do they look forward to them? Are they nervous about them because of what the Ukrainians might do? Is there general confidence and optimism? What is your sense about the elections?
Well, as far as the ability to have safe elections, I mean, every day there's attacks. Sometimes it's kind of hard to tell. Is Donetsk being targeted just because it's a Russian holiday like Easter? Because on Easter last year there was many killed. 2 days ago when Putin had his worldwide question and answer, there was, like I had mentioned, the street light center hit and 2 killed. There were many drones flown from Ukrainian territory over the city, dropping ammunition on civilian areas. Many people injured that day. And as well, in the evening, 3 long-range rockets launched on Mariupol for the first time in a while. So, with the Ukraine trying to make a point because of Putin's little Q&A holiday, maybe it's just because they just decided to, open up that day. Will there be attacks on election day? 100% there will be, because there's attacks every day. Will it be a specific increase just because of the election? Unfortunately, probably. So as far as what the people think about the elections, they're going to be overwhelmingly happy to vote in the Russian elections again. And the safety of the elections is going to be helped because basically now that it's war, for the last few elections, they have a system where there's mobile election centers that go out to the different areas of the city and the suburbs and other villages where they let people vote at the mobile station. And then on the last day, the elections go for about 5 days, and then there's one main day. And then on the last day, people can come who didn't have a chance to go to the mobile stations to the actual schools and gyms and whatnot to have the normal way you stand there with the boxes. But of course, I'll be covering that, and so will other channels like Cafe Revolution and things. I definitely recommend people check out their channel on YouTube and Telegram. So they put out a good work too. So,
Patrick, am I right in thinking that this is the first time that Donetsk, is participating in Russian elections since the end of the Soviet Union? I mean, they've had local elections, they've had the referendum that happened last year, but this is the first time that they are participating in an actual Russian election, an election to elect the bodies of power in Moscow, in this case, the president himself. And how do people feel about this? I mean, for the first time, they can vote for, if I'm right about this, that they can vote for the president of Russia, and he's in effect their president. They're voting for their own president. I mean, what is the sentiment about this in Donetsk? Do people think about that?
Yes, there's a little. You're right, and there's a little things I can add to this. So yes, this is the first time they're going to be able to vote for their president, the president of Russia, and they're going to be very happy to do it. And as far as a Russian election, the first technical Russian election was, as you said, the regional elections where they were able to regionally vote. But yes, this is the first time they're going to be able to vote for the power in Moscow as running their part of Russia. And they're very happy to do it.
I can imagine. I suppose I should ask this question because if I don't, people will wonder why. I mean, whom are they going to vote for? Are they going to vote for Putin overwhelmingly? Or are they going to vote for someone else?
Yeah, there's no question that the overwhelming population of these areas are going to be voting for Putin. I think the last I heard, the independent third-party estimates were in polls were 80% for Putin overall Russia, but I would have to think the Donbass would probably be about over 95%, I would think. And just in my opinion of the people, the locals I see, the soldiers I see, and, just talking to them about what they think, I would think, well over 95%. 95 is a conservative estimate, I think.
So one last question for me, and I'm to the actual war. Now, lots of things now in the Western media about Ukraine being short of tanks, ammunition, drones, you name it. They're supposedly short of it. What about on the Russian side, the soldiers that you meet? I mean, obviously, they would like more of everything. I mean, that's what soldiers will always want. But do they feel that they're getting basically what they need? I mean, that in terms of supplies, not just weapons, but, medical supplies, food, uniforms, water, all the things that soldiers need. I mean, are they properly supplied in this war? The Russian soldiers.
Well, I mean, as far as the weaponry, I show up at a artillery battery positions and go out with them, and they've got enough to fire. I mean, beyond the logistical setup. I mean, I know the Russian military, I forget offhand what it's called, but their system of supplying is more like a take and deliver. Take and deliver. They didn't really have to request it so much. It's just their system is based on delivering instead of waiting for the request. It's hard to say. I mean, I think the biggest thing is, there is movement on the front line, so they've got enough to make some sort of movement.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, I found that most a fantastic program from my part. I don't have anything specific more to ask, but is there anything you particularly want to say yourself? And then we'll hand over to Alex.
No, is there anything you want to say, Patrick, before
Yes.
we
Yes.
end the video?
Yes.
Well, I would think for people out there who aren't really maybe this is something new that you're hearing. Do some research. Don't just watch one source. Don't just watch one side. Watch reports from both sides of the line. Don't just watch your Western media. Watch bloggers from both sides, if you can find them. Watch me, watch the Duran, watch Redacted, watch Cafe Revolution in Donetsk. Watch as many different sources to get as much information as you can and educate yourself on what the real situation is, because not one source is going to be able to tell you everything you know. You need to get as much information from as many different sources as possible to even get a little bit of understanding of what's really happening. And don't fully believe anyone. And as far as my work, I'm pushing on back in Donbass. I'm going to keep on. And as always, I'm totally independent and crowdfunded. I might do collaborations with other channels, but I make a point to only be supported by my viewers. So if people would like, they can support me on the site Buy Me a Coffee, and I think we could put the link in the description maybe. And of course, follow me on YouTube, Patrick Lancaster News Today. Same on Twitter, Telegram, Rumble, of course, just in case. So, yeah, that's about it. Thanks for having me, guys, and hope the viewers got something out of it.
They certainly will, Pat, and so have we, by the way. Patrick Lancaster, thank you again. May I take this opportunity, by the way? Christmas, New Year, holidays are coming up. You won't be much on holiday, but can I, in any event, wish you season's greetings. And, of course, in the Russian world, they celebrate Christmas. I think it's on the 12th of January. But anyway, happy Christmas to all.
7.
Sorry? 7th,
Thank you very much.
7th January, whatever. You're quite right. It's 12. That's right. It's 12 days off. But anyway, happy Christmas to everybody also in Donbass.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Happy New
Stay
Year.
safe, Patrick. Stay
Stay safe. Absolutely.